Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gia Pace, and I'm the Public Programs Coordinator here at the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust. On behalf of the museum, I am pleased to welcome you all today to this event. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to give special thank you to two people who brought us all here together today. Buni Kohavi, Consul for Cultural Affairs, Office of Cultural Affairs, Consulate General of Israel in New York, as well as Renee Schreiber, Director of Performing Arts at the Consulate. And now let's get started. I would like to introduce Dr. Roy Horovitz. He is an internationally acclaimed Israeli actor, director, and scholar. He has performed many roles for various theaters in both Hebrew and English, and has been awarded twice Best Actor in international theater festivals. He also won the Israeli Best Director Award for Pollard's Trial and the Kameri Theater of Tel Aviv. This play was also written, as a coincidence, by the way, by Victor Gordon, the author of You Will Not Play Wagner, and our guest today. Dr. Horovitz's films include The Body with Antonio Banderas, and he has directed a succession of critically acclaimed productions which were performed throughout Israel, including Not About Nightingales by Tennessee Williams, Distracted by Lisa Loomer, Rabbit Hole by David Lindsay Aber, and Beyond Therapy by Christopher Durang. Dr. Horovitz also teaches theater at the Department of Comparative Literature in Bar-Ilan University, and was a visiting professor in the University of Texas in Austin, and is about to teach a course about Israeli drama at the American University in Washington, D.C. next year. Welcome, Dr. Horovitz.
Hello, Gia. Hello, everybody. Nice to be here. And first of all, thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be the ambassador of the currently muted Israeli theater nowadays. Right up until this sad crisis of COVID, we enjoyed here a very live and kicking theatrical scene. Israel actually is some kind of a theatrical empire. We have the highest rates of theater goers per capita in the world. Please bear in mind that what keeps or kept the industry going in places like your Broadway or the West End in London are not necessarily the local people, but mainly the tourists. Whereas in Israel, we used to sell every year around 6 million tickets with a population of just a bit over 8 million. So it's quite an impressive scene here. And we are here today with a production which I directed 2 years ago here in Israel, and enjoyed actually great acclaim and rave reviews, named, as you said, You Will Not Play Wagner, by the wonderful Jewish South African playwright Victor Gordon. I must say that Israeli theater in general has two central preoccupations. One is the conflict. We have many original plays and original writing that deals with, the situation in our area and the Jewish-Palestinian conflict. And the other one is understandably the Holocaust. And at any given time, you can find at least one play, which is the Holocaust play, staged here. And when I first came across this wonderful play of Victor, I thought it calls for staging here in Israel, especially when taking into consideration that the plot of the play itself takes place in Tel Aviv. So what we are about to do today is to show you three different scenes, typical scenes from the play. For the very first time, we are about to perform it in English. In Israel, we do it in Hebrew, obviously, but we got back to the original language. It was written in English. And afterwards, we'll open it to a discussion, and we'll have the panel, and I guess you'll have what to say. I think it's very thought-provoking and provocative within a way. The play, as I said, takes place in Tel Aviv during an international musical competition, pretty much like the Rubinstein competition, but for conductors, not for pianists. And we are at the stage of the finals of this competition. And different candidates, the finalists, are about to announce what they picked up or they wish to perform on the very last concert. And one guy, an Israeli, a young Israeli conductor, comes up with the idea of conducting Wagner, which I guess you know that ever since the Holocaust, Israel actually has discouraged the performance of Wagner works in Israel. And he comes up with this idea claiming that the rules of the competition allow him to pick or to choose any major composer, and that Wagner is a major composer, there is no dispute. The patron of the whole competition is a Jewish American lady, an elderly Jewish lady, a Holocaust survivor herself, which refuses to even hear about it. And behind the curtain, a world war actually burst. We were very lucky in Israel to have Miriam Zohar, the legendary Miriam Zohar, aged 89, a winner of Israel Prize for Life Achievement in the field of theater, and who is considered to be our first lady, the first lady of Israeli theater, in the leading role of Esther, this patron of the whole competition. And actually, we shot these scenes, which we are about to show you in a minute, at her apartment with all the COVID restrictions last week. And I suggest we just jump into the water and show you these 3 different scenes, and then we'll open it for a free discussion. So the first scene is from the very beginning of the play itself. Right after this young conductor dropped the bomb of announcing that that's what he wishes to perform, he's called into the office of the organizer of the competition. I wear many hats tonight. I'm also going to play this role. So I'm Maurice, the organizer of the competition, and Niv Petel, a young, wonderful actor, plays Asaf, this young conductor. And let's just see the first encounter between the two. So Gia, it's your turn.
Well, I'm not even sure what it's about.
Oh, come on. You're an Israeli, a musician. According to your CV, you were born and bred here. Classical music has been your lifeblood since you were no higher than a piss pot. And you want me to believe that you don't know what this is about? Obviously, this is no accident. You've planned this, given it careful thought, weighed up the pros and cons, and I would guess grabbed the opportunity for some great publicity. After all, you know what they say, even bad publicity is good. As good as you might be, and I don't deny you are good at your craft, a little spotlight does no harm, does it?
Except you're wrong.
Am I?
Of course, I would love to win, but only from being better than the others. For me, publicity has never been an issue. It's the furthest thing from my mind.
Of course, no doubt. Then you have a strange way of going about things.
Believe it or not.
Simple. Just withdraw your choice and replace it with another. There is no scarcity of great symphonic works. I don't need to tell you. You listed them on your CV, you've conducted many, you are obviously comfortable with all of them.
Except I'm not in the mood. Not for any of those guys.
Excuse me? You are not in the mood?
No. No, I'm not.
And what happens when you are engaged to conduct Dvořák and you are not in the mood?
Oh, then I'm paid. When I'm paid, I do what I'm told. This is different.
Well then, where do we go from here? By the way, we'll soon be joined by Esther Greenbaum. She's a little late.
Okay. Oh, the Esther Greenbaum.
Yeah,
Okay.
the patron of the competition. Or let me put it this way, the exceedingly generous patron of the competition. And should I mention, a Holocaust survivor. She flew in yesterday, probably her last visit. She's getting on and she's not well. She's come for the final round. The fact is, and I wouldn't ignore this, without her we have no competition. The prize money, all of it, every darn cent she puts up, $100,000. Not insignificant.
She probably can afford it.
That's not the point. Many can afford it. Not everyone is prepared to give it, as I'm sure you are aware. As it is, when it comes to handouts, the arts don't rate very high. Our sort of music usually occupies place somewhere near the bottom. The sort of position where you crawl in on your knees with a begging bowl. It used to be different, but that's another day.
Then my gratitude to her.
I should think so. Look, there is a reason Wagner is not performed in this country,
Of course.
so I don't need to explain. Well then, talk to me please, because it doesn't make sense.
Things must change.
They have, and I'm sure they will in their own time.
Oh, and now isn't the time.
Oh, and you are the one to facilitate that change.
Someone has to.
Oh, our own Don Quixote. Windmills. Wherever you look, windmills.
If you wish.
All right, why you?
It's simple. I refuse to live in the past. I hate the past. It suffocates me.
Suffocates you.
I refuse to live as a victim. That's not what I am, what we are, who we are.
You're 29,
You have my CV.
and you understand the world.
Let's say I understand my place in it, or where I wish to place myself.
Ideologically or historically?
Both. Ideologically, I believe in being a complete human being, with no need to prove anything and certainly not to apologize. And I approach my music from the same platform. Historically, I don't know how you can ask me knowing nothing about me. My background, my own history.
It's not your history that concerns me. It's our history. You've done the army?
Of course,
Was it a problem?
I served in a combat unit. Patrols, checkpoints, all the usual shit. Thank God, no action. And before you ask me how's my politics, somewhere to the left, okay? Not extreme, but it has nothing to do with this. Nothing at all.
Okay, so this was only the beginning, and once Maurice fails to change the young guy's mind, the star walks in, Esther Greenbaum, the patron. I don't remember if I mentioned that Miriam Zohar, by the way, is a Holocaust survivor herself, and she really was very quickly attached to the play from first sight or first encounter with the text. And let's go for the trio scene, the second scene, which takes place just a couple of hours later on, when she understands that she has to take a step in and try and convince the young man herself with her own arguments and experience. Let's go for the second scene.
Your choice. You have yet to explain it.
Explain?
Yes. When you are fully aware, it can be accepted.
All right. Why Wagner? So, well, two reasons. One, why not? Any acceptable reason? To not play Wagner here is a tradition, that's it. And stupid, no more. But what law? Nothing. Just you will not play Wagner. From that, there's no gain, only much to lose. And I read your rules. There's nothing. I've read them, so I may choose any major composer. Wagner is that, a major composer. There's no dispute.
Perhaps. But whether I personally agree is not the issue.
You're wrong. It is the issue. It's the whole issue. With respect, these rules, these parameters, were set by you. I did what I was asked. I followed them. I chose a major composer. So had I chosen Glinka or Mussorgsky, who, by the way, never hid their dislike for Jews, would there be any problem? And their music is not Wagner. So here's reason number 2. It is great music. Wagner is unique for any conductor, a challenge different from any other composer.
So is Brahms, Sibelius, Beethoven.
Of course. But we're not talking about Brahms, Sibelius, or Beethoven.
Correct. Correct. We are addressing a low life, a horrible anti-Semite.
Okay, but even there's dispute. I'm sure you're well aware he had many Jewish friends.
Oh, sure. Some of his best friends were Jews.
Hermann Levy, you must know of him.
Oh, of course, of course.
He conducted Parsifal, the premiere. And Joseph Rubinstein, the pianist, he lived with Wagner for years and killed himself when Wagner died.
Yes, yes, all this I know.
And then his publisher, another Jew.
Yes, yes, I know about Levy, a pathetic sycophant who allowed Wagner to wipe his boots on him and came back for more. Some relationship. Loyalty from Levy, humiliation from Wagner. And there were others, core Jews. So he had some Yiddish friends. Does that mean we just ignore his writing? His influence on Hitler? On the Great Third Reich?
What influence? He had no influence. He was dead 50 years before Hitler.
Of course, no direct influence, face to face. But you must know what Hitler said. If you wish to understand the philosophy of the Third Reich, you need only listen to Wagner. Is this now inconsequential? Because he forgets some sort of relationship with some self-doubting Jews? Perhaps. Perhaps it was to his advantage. Perhaps they themselves hated their own Jewishness. Of those there are plenty. We have them here, right here amongst us.
With my deepest respect, Mrs. Greenbaum, the fact is it's been oversimplified for years, reduced to some common level.
Simplified? What? How?
Anti-Semitism, Jew hatred, the whole world is against us.
What is that? Let me assure you, anti-Semitism is never simple. It is not about a flu.
Of course not. You know what I mean.
No, don't assume to know what I know. What I know tells me it's irrational, beyond human understanding.
Irrational? Any more irrational than banning Wagner but playing Carmina Burana by Karl Orff, a card-carrying Nazi, and nobody objects?
You contradict yourself.
Banning music does nothing. Nothing to stop anti-Semitism. How can it? Parsifal should contribute no more pain to a Jew than a Mercedes driving through the streets of Tel Aviv, and should look around. There are many of them. It makes no sense. None at all. And I refuse to take part in such thinking.
What and how you think has little relevance to what's going on here. A competition, nothing else. Not a platform for political advocacy for those who wish to change the fucking world. For that, there are other avenues, and if you like, I'll suggest a few. But this ain't one.
There are many, Asaf. A great many who disagree with your reasoning. This country has thousands of survivors who deserve their peace without torment. Therefore, I still argue for the ban of his music, because it is not just music. It is the bearer of a message that was clearly understood by those who revered his genius. And I believe that's a good enough reason.
Of course, you're a survivor. But then I too am a survivor.
Excuse me?
My grandfather was in Dachau. My grandmother, Bergen-Belsen, and her sisters, they survived. So I'm the child of survivors, so I believe I too am a survivor.
For Christ's sake.
No doubt you have your issues. It never ends, never.
Unless you remove yourself from it, unless you redefine your existence, yours and those around you. Otherwise, how do we ever end this self-flagellation?
So, you are saying we simply abandon, destroy the memories, wipe them somehow from our conscience? Or are you saying that we forget and also forgive? Or do we forgive but not forget? Let me tell you, Asaf, I will never forget, and neither will I ever forgive. Never. Would it not be easier for me to live without these horrid dreams, these memories that haunt me?
Look, I'm sorry.
Oh, you're sorry.
Of course, it was never my intention. I know nothing of your past.
My past is irrelevant. Just one of thousands who survived, many of whom have arrived here straight from the camps with nothing, less than nothing, to a new country that all too often, to its shame, failed to even bid them welcome. Saw them as weak, a danger to the spirit of the new Jew who had resolved not to let it happen again. Never again. No submission, no surrender, no gas, and no Wagner. You want Wagner? Go to Bayreuth! What happens elsewhere, I can't control. And no doubt, the time will come when they will forget or just no longer care, where people like me will become an obstacle to what they see as progress. It's already happened at the very highest level within our own Knesset, when it took that shameful decision to accept from Germany money stained with the blood of 6 million. You will not play Wagner, not in this competition.
Tell me, my friend, do you understand what's at stake here? Not just your crass insensitivity. That should be obvious even to you. Also, let's put aside that what you are doing could jeopardize the entire competition. Years of work, meaningless, because I, and yes, I take full responsibility, overlooked a clause in the rules. Well, you, of course, can't be blamed. How could you? You heard me? It's not your error, it's mine. The blame lies squarely with me. But if you carry on insisting on playing Wagner, you'll be tormenting, insulting, even damaging a heck of a lot of others who, for a shitload of reasons, don't want this music aired publicly in this country. Well, it seems to leave you unmoved. Now, how can this be other than plain goddamn selfishness?
I'm not afraid of Wagner like you are. When I play Wagner, he'll do my bidding. If I wish him to be pianissimo, it is my decision. If forte, perhaps fortissimo, enough to awaken the dead, it remains my choice. And that is why my Wagner will be like no other ever before performed.
Is that your final word?
I need to think.
Yeah. I'd encourage you to do just that.
By when do you need my answer?
Yesterday. But if you insist, tomorrow, midday, no later.
בסדר. So be it.
Okay, this was the second one. I admit that, you know, I've been working and hearing these monologues and texts over and over again, but it keeps moving me, especially when Miriam performs it. The last one, the last scene is between the two, the protagonist and the antagonist. The two generations finally meet for a final attempt to try and solve this unsolvable conflict. And let's just see it, and then we can open it. I think by the time you already understood that we have a play here with some very heavy arguments and for both sides. I think the pros and the cons are very cleverly both represented here. And the questions of whether we can go beyond the biography of a creator, of an artist, and focus only on the outcome of his work, I think it's a major question. And Wagner, of course, is only one case study out of many others that we can point out. Let's go for the final one. Miriam and Niv, Esther and Asaf.
Let's talk about Wagner. His music is awful, so I believe. And I don't speak without knowledge. No, no. Not only have I heard it, but at one time, I was 14. I was forced on pain of death to play it, day after day, month after month. Wagner arranged for camp orchestra. And what makes it worse, were I not able to play the violin, were I not able to play this music, this Wagner, I would not be alive. Is that not dreadful? To find myself having to feel some gratitude for this monster? It violated me then and still does. Even more so because now I realize from where it comes. But you, it seems, are determined to take it elsewhere. Some stubborn crusade which will contribute nothing to the healing of this nation. Nothing. Already, we have enough that drives us apart. We need no reminding. Those who lived through it then relive it day after day. By not playing Wagner, your sacrifice is small, far smaller than mine.
You know, we are on different planets. Though this also is my country, the only one I've known, except for my time when I studied in Berlin. And let me tell you, at the conservatoire, I arrived with certain preconceptions, probably no different from others who grow up here in Israel. But there, I also had my first Wagner experience. Lohengrin, the incredible prelude to Act 1. I entered the hall with a deep sense of trepidation, almost fearful. You know, what effect would this exposure to the devil of music have on me? So I sat, waiting for the opening like a traitor, betraying my own beliefs, sick to my gut, waiting to hate what I was about to hear. To my surprise, Esther, it was nothing like anything I had ever before encountered. The threat I awaited failed to materialize. Only sounds so exquisite that I realized that I neglected to breathe.
How nice.
Please, may I finish?
No! because that's not my experience. What I hear, do you know what I hear? What I hear is terror. What I see are lines upon lines of sick, dead Jews forced to sing on their way to break rocks in a Polish quarry, to sing on the whim of their guards, beaten if too loud or too soft, beaten and beaten again, while we the band, scratched out Lohengrin to entertain the officers who at any time could end our lives just for playing a wrong note. Can you begin to imagine?
Of course not. No. How could I possibly?
Exactly. How can you possibly?
Well, this is it. How can one possibly understand what was going on there and what's her experience? And as she tells him, you want Wagner go to Bayreuth. I think what is, and this will be my final word, and then we'll open it to you. I think what is very clever about the play, and you know, as Hamlet put it, the play is the thing, is that it has some kind of an open ending. Everybody is right here, and I think people walk out of the theater, and the questions, you know, keep going with them. It doesn't bring any final solution. Or it just brings up the difficulties and the arguments from both sides. Okay, let's take it from here, Gia. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very, very powerful scenes. I'd like to bring out our next guest. Victor Gordon is a retired businessman. He's with us from South Africa. He has several long established interests. He's a playwright with 10 professional productions on television and stage in South Africa, as well as the Camry Theatre, Tel Aviv, and the Eternity Playhouse in Sydney, Australia, where You Will Not Play Wagner enjoyed critical acclaim. Stage readings of Wagner have been presented at the Henry Green Jewish Theatre in Toronto, the Micro Theatre, Tel Aviv, and the Jerusalem Theatre. College Trial, which toured Israel after a successful extended run at the Camry, received an invitation to mount a special performance at the Israeli Knesset before an invited audience of 350 hosted by the current state president. Gordon won the prestigious Amstel Playwright of the Year award, as well as the South African Provincial Arts Council's award. He was also the co-winner of the first SATV English Drama Award for a television play. He enjoys reading history and biographies and paints in watercolors and pastels. He is a retired jazz musician who played the clarinet and saxophone semi-professionally. Also, Professor Emeritus Moshe Zuckermann is from Tel Aviv University. If you can turn your cameras on, welcome to you both. Hi.
Hi,
Hello.
G. Hi. Hi.
Thank you for being here with us today. Our first question is for Victor. Victor, what inspired you to write this piece?
Well, the progression leading to the final format of the play evolved in a somewhat convoluted manner. Initially, the inspiration came from an entirely different source that had little to do with Wagner, if anything. But having attended several music competitions at the highest level, I'm invariably reminded that the judgment of competitions within the realm of the arts must inevitably be highly subjective. And this actually is dealt with to a degree in parts of the play that we didn't hear tonight. In other words, can art, and even more so music, produce a clear-cut, objective winner when it's so much an individual matter of preference and interpretation? So the play was initially intended to be an attempt to tackle this question. However, I happened to view a documentary on Zubin Mehta some years ago, who in 1981 wished to perform an extract from Wagner, Tristan and Isolde, at a concert in Tel Aviv, only to have it disrupted by audience members, including Holocaust survivors, who objected vociferously to the performance of anything by Wagner. It was only then, when I started thinking about a potential plot, that the focus began to shift in an entirely different direction, namely a debate about the unofficial ban on the live performance of Wagner in Israel. What inspired me further was the unmistakable presence of conflict and confrontation and contention, all essential elements in drama. They were glaringly obvious and could be exploited in several ways. Not only the essential conflict between the characters themselves, but the conflict that existed within Israeli society itself. So that's how the play evolved, and starting from an entirely different premise, ending up to what we now have.
Thank you. And Roy, how did you come upon this play, and why were you drawn to it?
I'm sorry, would you repeat that?
This is for Roy. Roy,
Oh,
how did you come upon this play? How did you meet Victor and come upon this play, and why were you drawn to it?
Well, as I said at the beginning, Israeli theater deals a lot with the Holocaust, and we have a lot of Holocaust dramas here. And I've been involved in a production which actually became some kind of an international hit, named The Timekeepers, which actually is an American play by the wonderful playwright Dan Clancy, which we have been touring for the last 12 years. And I think it was back in 2009 or 2010 that we were touring this production in South Africa. And there I met Victor. We had a performance at the Theater on the Square in Johannesburg. And after the premiere, we had a special ceremony, some kind of an official welcome by the Israeli ambassador there. And he actually invited some local theater artists. And it turned out that Victor and myself, we found ourselves sitting at the table next to each other. And then he told me about his play that he was working on then about the affair of Jonathan Pollard, who actually was arrested in the States. And I read it, and then later on we produced it. I directed it at the Camera Theater in Tel Aviv, and it was very successful. And then we started this dialogue, and then he gave me this second play. And as I said, it was love from first sight, because I found it very, first of all, I really admired, the way he was doing the research. It was very powerful and impressive, with all the data and the information. And I think the dramatic power of, it's not a very long play. It takes about an hour and 10 minutes or something like that. But I think within a very short time, he manages to bring up, I think, the main arguments and actually make you, change your mind. Whoever speaks, I think you are with him. And that's a very unique, I think, artistic merit of a play. And as a director, I'm in constant search for plays which I think that I can come to the cast, to the actors, and say, look, you have a very rich and developed and interesting characters here and arguments, and it's a meaningful piece. We won't waste our time and the audience time, but we come up with something which is worth listening to. So all this coming together, made me think that this is the right play to pick up and to stage.
Yeah, Moshe, there are no shortage of German goods in modern Israel, BMWs being just one example. What is it about Wagner that is so uniquely deplorable that led to his music being censored?
Well, let me start by saying that I personally don't care whether Wagner is played in Israel or not. If I want to hear Wagner, I can do it at home. And if I want to hear it performed on stage, I really can go to Bayreuth or to go to Berlin or to Paris or to New York, wherever. I don't think that the dispute about Wagner in Israel has anything to do with Wagner. That might be a surprise for you, but I don't think that we're dealing with Wagner when we are disputing about Wagner, because first of all, I think there's a big ignorance about Wagner in the dispute. One of the scenes that you played here says that Miriam Zohar, the wonderful performer, has been, I don't remember her name, in the play, Mrs. Greenbaum?
Esther Greenbaum.
Esther Greenbaum. Well, she couldn't have played Wagner in the camps because Wagner was not played in the camp. What was played in the camp was most Mozart and Haydn and Schubert and so on. The camp orchestra was not equipped in order to play Wagner because you need a 120 players orchestra to do that. So this is one of the myths that people were put to death while Wagner was played. This is a myth. A lot of myth is going around Wagner, but I think that Victor has put up the real problem, and it's the question of the bigotry about trying to think that you are remembering the Holocaust in any way when you are banning Wagner. I mean, you really are living in a country here in Israel, which in 1952, 7 years after Auschwitz, had already a deal with Western Germany, paying a lot of money in order, German money in order to build up this country. The country is full of Mercedes, Volkswagen was an invention by Hitler. Every Volkswagen that goes on the street reminds us much more about the Holocaust than Wagner. I don't know whether you know that we have a big discussion here at the moment, a question whether the submarines that were bought was built by Germany for the Israeli Marine, 6 should have been, and 9, it's now, you know who built them? ThyssenKrupp built them. Thyssen and Krupp were 2 major companies in the Nazis, worked for the Nazis. Now, it's good to have some submarines, it's good to have some Mercedes and Volkswagen, but Wagner, who died in 1883, he has become the symbol of remembering the Holocaust. And I think the reason for it is, and this is why I think the question is not whether Wagner is deplorable, but what does he serve? He serves to use something which reminds us of Germany paying the lowest price in order to be able to remember with somebody who died in 1883 and not having to pay the material price for banning, for example, or boycotting German goods and German weapons and German money, who is, by the way, financing the university in which I was taught. I was the head of the Institute for German History, which was financed by the Stiftung Volkswagen, by the Volkswagen Foundation and so on. So we have a lot of bigotry here in this, and I think it has to do with something which started, by the way, not after the Holocaust, it started before the Holocaust. In 1938, the Palestine Orchestra, which was later on the IPO, the Israeli Philharmonic Orchestra, was about to make a tournée to Cairo. And then there was the Kristallnacht, you know, I don't know how you call it in English, you know, the pogrom of November 1938. And then they first felt obliged to give some kind of sign that we are identifying with the Jews in Germany. So they took off the two Wagner pieces which they intended to play in order then, by the way, actually playing them on the tournée. But ever since we have this boycott, it did not start in after 45. It started, so to speak, in 38. In that respect, I think that we're really not dealing with Wagner. We're dealing here with our struggling with remembering the Holocaust, and Miriam Zohar so movingly expressed it, that the way that the Holocaust survivor was received in Israel was nothing that reminds us of this sensitivity, which is expressed when saying don't play Wagner because they can be hurt. And by the way, we know that about the Holocaust survivors. Some of them hate Wagner. Most of them don't care anything about Wagner, and some of them are themselves Wagner listeners. By the way, I made another test and talked to Holocaust survivors living in America or in France or in Germany, and it turned out that they didn't know what is about Wagner that you're talking. We're talking about the remembering the Holocaust. It's an Israeli issue. It is an ideological Israeli issue. It has nothing whatsoever to do with the Holocaust, qua Holocaust survivors, but it has to do something with the ideology that we're performing here. And I want to stress again, I don't care whether Wagner is played or not, but I care very much about the kind of Holocaust remembrance we have here in Israel.
Thank you. This discussion that we're having today ties into the contemporary issue of cancel culture, with Israel canceling Wagner outright. Where do you all stand on this debate? Moshe, you just answered that, but does anybody else want to add to that? Is there a time and a place for censorship? And if so, is this one instance where it's justified?
Do you ask me the question, whether we have another?
No, Roy and Victor, do you want to add to that?
Well, I personally don't feel I know enough about Israel in that sense to pass a scholarly opinion. The impression that I have, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that there is no censorship in Israel. Roy will tell me if I'm being naive or not, but
not officially.
Not officially. Okay.
Only self-censorship.
But Victor, you are of course naive, because we have censorship. It's not official, as Roy says, but we have censorship, of course.
All right. Well, okay. I don't know enough about it to pass an opinion, so I'm going to let that one go.
I can tell you, Gia, that we have, especially in the recent years, when we have some very ideological ministers of culture and so on, who, because most of the theaters are financed by state money, try to intervene in what kind of plays are played. For example, if there are themes, as Roy said at the beginning, many of the issues are Israeli-Palestinian issues. If some of the ministers didn't like the way that the issue is, where you, for example, take the Palestinian side and so on, then there was very much a kind of censorship, sometimes even trying to boycott an whole theater, not only a play. So in that respect, I think that we have some kind of censorship, but of course nothing compares to Wagner. And Wagner itself, as I said, is not involved in the whole issue. They don't talk about Wagner. They talk about the Holocaust remembrance, and that Wagner was chosen for that matter seems to be a very ludicrous thing.
So this is for all of the panelists. Is there any way, how do you think people can separate the person and who they were from their accomplishments?
I would like to say that you have to separate the man and his work. Otherwise, you can really, if you take anti-Semitism, you have to banish some 50 to 60% of European culture if you want to have it performed or shown or read in Israel. Dostoevsky was an anti-Semite. There are even sayings by Beethoven, who was an anti-Semitic. He was not an anti-Semite, anti-Semitic, anti-Jews sayings and so on. You have to separate the work from his men. And this is one thing that I would like to stress out. Wagner was one of the major anti-Semites in 19th century. By the way, not one who has race in his conception of anti-Semitism. He was one of the major, but you don't find anti-Semitism in his work. And if Miriam Zohar in her role hears terror and so on, this is what, of course, people project on that. It has nothing to do with the work itself. And I have to say that when the conductor starts to play Lohengrin, the prelude to the opera, this is not something that you can connect to terror. But if you, of course, think in Wagner in terms of a Nazi, which he was not, if you turn in terms of a Nazi, then of course you can project even on the prelude of Lohengrin terror. And I have to say, Hitler may have liked Wagner. I don't think that he was his favorite composer. His favorite composer was Franz Lehár, an operetta. But you have to remember that one of his biggest fans of Wagner was in his time no other than Theodor Herzl, who said that every time when he was writing the Jewish state, his books and so on, he was going to listen to Tannhäuser in Vienna. So, you know, it's a problem. You can't say you hear terror. Obviously, Herzl didn't hear terror when he heard Tannhäuser.
Look, I think if you want to reduce this to a very common denominator and try and put your finger on what's happening or has happened over the years, this is a very clear example of hypocrisy at its worst, because all the focus and all the attention is on Wagner and what Wagner means in terms of anti-Semitism and in terms of his place, his supposed place in terms of Jews. But when you consider that Chopin, that Liszt, that Schumann, that Karl Orff, who was a card-carrying Nazi, all expressed anti-Semitic feelings and even wrote their feelings down. It wasn't just in passing. And all their music is played in Israel without any question. In fact, when in 1938, when the attempt to play Wagner then, it was actually Arturo Toscanini who was going to conduct that concert. It was the first concert that was being given by the newly formed Palestine Symphony Orchestra. Kristallnacht, as Moshe has said before, just occurred, and there was such sensitivity about it that they asked him to replace it with somebody else. So what did he replace it with? They replaced it with Stravinsky, who was probably as big an anti-Semite as Wagner was. But that went past unnoticed. Nobody said anything. Nobody even seemed to observe that. So you've got one instance of hypocrisy on another. And the fact that the streets are full of BMWs and Mercedes and the shops are full of German goods, and Germany is probably one of Israel's closest allies nowadays. You know, there's so much more to it than just a simple definition that Wagner is a huge anti-Semite and deserves to be boycotted in Israel because of that. You know, Wagner is not causing, Wagner never caused harm to any Jew that I'm aware of, that I've read about anywhere. He was never, he didn't take part in the Holocaust. He was not around in those days. None of this was his fault, but he's the epitome, he's the symbol now of anti-Semitism and certainly in terms of the Israeli perspective. And we'll only get over that probably when the last Holocaust survivor has passed on. And maybe even then, only when the next generation who were associated with them has passed on as well. To get that out of our blood. I think that is the major consideration, the sensitivity that one must keep in mind when it comes to Holocaust survivors who live in Israel.
Thank you. Roy, we're going to switch gears a little bit here, and I want you, we saw a couple of scenes from the play today, and I'm wondering, Roy, do you have like a favorite scene? Was one of these scenes that we saw today your favorite scene, or do you have another favorite scene, and why do you like that?
First of all, as I said, it's quite a short play, so I like it cover to cover, but I think if I'm to choose, maybe not a scene, maybe, you know, a theatrical gesture. I think there is something which, for me, tells the whole story. When they first meet Esther and Asaf, he puts out his hand to her, and she refuses to shake it because she says there is time and place for everything, and we'll get to that maybe if you'll cooperate. And at the end of the play, when I don't want to do any spoilers, but when they come to some kind of terms, she is the one to extend her hand to him, and I think via this gesture, you know, theater is not about the words, and it's not about the text. It's actually about what you see, and I think that tells the whole story. Maybe I'm a bit romantic here, but it starts, for me, that was a key moment. You know, it starts with them refusing to shake hands, and it ends with the understanding. She says to him when she shakes his hand, you know, please be patient. You know, time is on your side, not mine. And I think this small gesture of the handshake is for me the most precious one.
Yeah, because it's coming full circle.
That's right.
Victor, do you have? I know you wrote the play, but do you have? Is there a scene or a moment in the play that's especially important to you?
Yeah, difficult to come up with.
You can agree with your director, Victor. You can come up with the same answer.
I referred to a subplot in the play that was not touched on even in there wasn't time and the opportunity to touch on it, but it's a very important subplot that goes through the entirety of the play, and that is to do with a violin that belonged to Esther that was stolen on the night of Kristallnacht, when she and her family had to run for their lives, and she leaves a violin, a very good violin, because she was a very good prodigy violinist, that her father bought her, that was made by Giuseppe Scarampella, who's a real violin maker, not a name that's made up. But she apparently had a Scarampella, and she puts it in her cupboard with a little note, which he pushes into the F hole of the violin, saying who owned it, who she is, how old she is, the address that the violin was left at, and saying anybody who might find this violin, please look after it and love it as much as I did, never expecting to see it again. But there is a scene at the end of the play where the violin comes into the story again, and she speaks to Asaf and tells him the story of the violin, which leads to the conclusion of the play. So it plays a very important part, and you wonder possibly in the course of the play what it's doing there. You know, is there any place for it? But it certainly does come out at the end. So I like the speech that she makes at the end. I certainly enjoyed constructing it and got a lot out of doing so. And whenever I've seen it played, I've always been moved to hear it. So yes, that is probably my favorite scene.
Great. What do you hope that people come away from this play feeling, learning? And do you have any future plans to mount it either virtually or in person anytime in the future?
You're asking me?
This is for both Roy and Victor.
Oh, Roy, do you want to go first?
What was the question? What would I like people to go out from the venue with?
Yeah. What do you hope they will learn or feel?
I don't presume, you know, to lecture or to teach anybody a lesson. I hope they'll get the different perspectives, because I think everybody has a point here. And mostly I would like them to see this specific case as I said, as a case study or as a metaphor for other cases as well. You know, recently, you know, with Me Too, we have the same issues. You know, whether you can separate what you know, the facts, the biographical facts from what people contributed. Michael Jackson, you know, it's a never-ending subject, and I think if we manage to shed some light on the complexity of it, this will do for me.
Victor?
In terms of me, Gia, I think of the play, you know, in Australia when it was put on there, every night people would come out and be discussing it and talking about it, and would let me know that on the way home they had this debate all the way home and over coffee and all that sort of thing. And to me, that is the most satisfying thing, that if you can get people to talk about an issue that you present in your work, and this is an issue that is wide open for discussion. After all, it is a debate, and debates by nature prompt discussion. Then I'm very happy, because that's what I set out to do. And there is so much unresolved after 85 years. This issue has been around for 85 years, and there's no sign of it dying out yet. If this helps to get some sort of discussion going that is productive, well then I'm very happy about that. At this point, Roy, I just want to thank you for the work you did here and your wonderful cast for making themselves available. They really have done a magnificent job with you, and thank you to all of them. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that.
I can tell you that, you know, it's a short play, but sometimes the post-show discussions are longer than the performance itself, because people really argue and get very emotional and involved. So yes, in that sense, you achieved your goal. You managed to to get them really into it. Yeah.
Good, good.
I have some people asking in the chat what the future of the play is, and if they want to read it, how they can do that, or is there a way to see the entire play? Are you planning on streaming it, or?
What's the future of the theater in general? You know, once we get back, we'll certainly would love to, you know, to do it again. Who knows, if anyone can arrange something, we are, you know, we'll be more than happy. I don't know. In Israel, we perform it in Hebrew, as I said, but who knows? You know, we are open to suggestions, tours, whatever.
Is there a way that people can read it now, or?
If Gia, if you've got my email address, if you'd like to pass it on to anybody who wants to read it, but keep it to themselves, I wouldn't like it sort of distributed, they can contact me, and we'll take it from there. Okay,
great, thank you. I have a few questions. I'm going to open the questions up to the audience, and I have a question from Danielle. How much was the music incorporated into the play? We heard a little bit of it when you edited it together, but can you tell us a little bit about incorporating the music into the play and how that happened?
In our production, that's the only point where we actually play it, and she stops it, you know, right away. Yeah, we used the other music, you know, which was originally written for the production. That's the only point. But other productions, you know, it's for each director to decide which music he wants to.
Yeah, I left that open-ended in terms of the play. If they wanted to put in linking extracts between scenes, well, there's no problem as far as I'm concerned. But the only one that was mandatory, particularly important, was that opening of, I think it's for Siegfried, I'm not too sure where, but it's 134 bars long. One chord that is just played endlessly for 134 bars and just getting louder and louder and bigger and fuller. It's quite an amazing thing to listen to. I was never a fan of Wagner's music, I thought. I never bothered to listen to it until I started writing the play, and then I started listening to get an idea of what I was involving myself in. And when I discovered this particular entree, this prelude, I just couldn't believe it. I mean, it was absolutely outstandingly beautiful. So that I put in, but it doesn't last for more than about 10 seconds in the play, and then it's cut. But that's all. There's no other music that I stipulate.
Moshe, is there a difference in the way U.S. People who are Jewish in the U.S. and people in Israel feel about this topic? Do you find that there's a difference?
Different to what? I didn't understand the question.
In their feelings towards Wagner's music.
In Israel, you mean?
You feel like there's a difference in opinion for Israeli?
Yeah, I think most of the people. I don't think. I mean, we are putting in as an issue as if it, an everyday life issue. It's not at all. Most of the people in Israel don't know anything about Wagner and are not interested in Wagner. And I don't think that the issue is the issue about Wagner, because they don't know anything about him and about his music. I think, as I said before, it's more the issue about the remembrance of the Holocaust and the mere fact that Wagner has become a symbol is for me a big problem. I mean, because Wagner, as Victor himself said, it has nothing whatsoever to do with the Holocaust, but he has become the epitome, the symbol of it. And I think this is the major problem. Most of the people in Israel, and it goes not only for Wagner, but for classical music as well, but as a whole, but most of the people don't care about Wagner, and it's not an issue that is discussed in everyday life. Once in a while, there is, as it was with Zubin Mehta and later on with Daniel Barenboim, who tried to play Wagner, and there is a big upheaval, and then it's quiet for the next 10 years or next 15 years. Wagner is not really discussed in Israel, and it's not Wagner we're talking about here.
Okay. I just wanted to give you all a minute if you wanted to say something in closing. Any last comments that you have?
I'd like to say something, and I think that in this respect, I think that there was the argument that we have to respect the emotion of every Holocaust survivor. And I agree. I'm by myself a son of two Auschwitz survivors, so I know what people are talking about. But I have to say that Israel was not very sensitive in, having the Holocaust survivors when they came to Israel. I mean, it was really a big tragedy, the way that they were accepted at the beginning, because they're really, as Victor said it in one of these monologues, contradicted, or I think that the conductor says he contradicted the idea of the new Jew. The Holocaust survivors were not what, as a matter of fact, people really awaited here. And Israel was for many, many years so much not sensitive to Holocaust survivors that, as a matter of fact, for some years ago, Israel as a state asked the Holocaust survivors for forgiving, for having treated them the way they treated them. So even in that respect, to discuss Wagner as being sensitive, not playing him being sensitive to the Holocaust survivor, is an even bigger hypocrisy than what we're talking about here.
Roy, do you have any comments that you want to leave us with?
Maybe just to say that it feels to me nowadays, as I said at the beginning, as though we've become some kind of a chapter in a dystopia of some kind, and we have to find these solutions and do theater, you know, via this Zoom. We all became baby Zoomers, and I really miss the direct contact, but I thank you very much for having us here. It was, you know, it gave us back a bit of a sense of theater and what we miss so much these days. And I really hope to bring it back, this piece and others, to back to the stage very soon. Thank you very much.
Victor, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I had this thought this afternoon when I was thinking about things, and anyway, I'll put it for what it is. It just occurred to me that if Wagner was the monster that he has been made to be in the minds of Jews and Israelis, if he was alive in 1945, would he have been indicted as a war criminal? And would he have stood in the dock at Nuremberg with the others of his ilk and his standing? Because he has certainly been painted as somebody as vile as any of them. So I think it's an interesting thought, maybe worth a play one day. That's
Victor,
it.
let me tell you that if Wagner has lived to the time of the National Socialism, he wouldn't have been there. He would have gone to Hollywood.
Probably.
Well, thank you all for joining us today. Moshe and Roy from Israel, Victor from South Africa. Thank you to the performers for presenting this very complicated topic to us today. I also want to once again thank Buni Kohavi, Consul for Cultural Affairs, and Renee Schreiber, Director of Performing Arts, both from the Office of Cultural Affairs, Consulate General of Israel in New York. Thank you to everyone out there in Zoomland for joining us today. Please take a look at our upcoming offerings at the Museum of Jewish Heritage at mjhnyc.org, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you all.
Thank you very much,
Thank you so
Gia.
much.
Thank you for hosting this. Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.